Iowa, that could be the case. But I think what you're seeing here is a very close race. Even
now more, Senator John McCain. David?
Well, Tom, you're certainly right. One of Bob Dole's closest friends in the Senate. He traveled with us through this last 96 hours of the campaign. You've been up with Bob Dole. Tell me what the mood is right now.
His mood has been upbeat. His mood has been steady. It's been cheerful. He's been doing all the work while the rest of us strap hangers are watching a great performance. And whether he wins or loses tonight, it's a heroic way to go out, which is the way he began his career, and I'm very proud of him.
But Senator, you know, on the plane flight back, the exit poll results were coming in. Bob Dole, if nothing else, he's a realist. He knew at a certain point that this was not going to happen tonight. How does he cope with that?
And the way he always has adversity, with a steady, optimistic outlook. Look, if this guy wasn't an optimist, he'd have never gotten off that bed in a VA hospital. And he never has betrayed pessimism throughout it, but he is also a realist. But he really goes out of this knowing that he did the very best that he can, and I believe that he did the very best that he could. There's going to be a lot of second guessing and, you know, the kinds of things that happen after an election is over, but I'm proud of the job he did. I still think the West can come in strong for him, and I'm very interested, by the way, that this is only about a 4% difference in the popular vote. ABC poll had a 16% difference, as you know. So this is popular-wise, it's very respectable even so far.
But when you sit down with your close friend Bob Dole and try to explain how this happened, how this turned apparently into such a landslide, how do you do that?
Well, first of all, I ain't giving up until the polls close in Guam. But if this trend continues, look, I'm going to say, Bob, you fought the good fight. There's a good economy, best politician probably has ever held the White House is there, and you did the right thing, and God bless you, and thank you. Thank you for serving our country so well. And I think that's what most Republicans are going to say.
Senator John McCain of Arizona, thank you so much. Tom, back to you.
Thank you, Senator McCain. Thank you, David Bloom. Well, let's go now to NBC's Brian Williams, who's been the White House correspondent for much of the past 2 years. 2 years ago at this time, when we were trying, not exactly this night, obviously, but it was election night in November, when George Stephanopoulos and James Carville and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were looking at those Republican election returns. They were at the lowest point, they've even talked about this, in their political lives.
That's right, and we remember the sight of the puffy-faced president having been up most of the night, seeing the press first thing in the morning, saying that he would recover from this, and he set about to recover from this and did. And now what I think we can expect in a second Clinton term, Tom, this is going to be a president playing for legacy. He is already saying at age 50 in speeches, ladies and gentlemen, I've reached that point in my life where I've realized I have more yesterdays than tomorrows. This is a man who's going to be speaking in quotes, but thinking about how the inscriptions will look when people sum up his presidency. And that, I think, is why there will be so much anger within the White House at what are destined to be continuing investigations into the various scandals, or what the GOP hopes will turn into scandals concerning this administration.
All right, thanks very much, Brian Williams. We want to take you now to the Senate races around the country. A lot of them still hotly contested, but we have a winner tonight in the state of Virginia, John Warner, a Republican returning. He had a very tough race from Mark Warner, a young entrepreneur with a lot of money. I think he spent about $8 million of his own money. In the state of Wyoming, Alan Simpson retired. Michael Enzi, a Republican, will take his seat, so the Republicans hang on to that one, much to their relief. That was another hotly contested race. Jack Reed, the Democrat in Rhode Island, Claiborne Pell is retiring, so that stays in the Democratic column. Our projected winner in New Mexico, no surprise here, Pete Domenici, who's a very powerful member of the Senate Budget Committee. He goes back. In Minnesota, the most liberal man in the United States Senate is Paul Wellstone. A lot of Republicans thought it was a mistake when he won 6 years ago. He had a rematch against Rudy Boschwitz. Rudy Boschwitz ran some very negative ads, and the Minnesota voters rejected those ads. Paul Wellstone hangs on to his seat. So, as it stands at this hour, no change. We have 43 Democrats who have been elected, 46 Republicans who will be in the chamber. We have an evening that is still long in terms of the Senate race. There was a 6-vote margin for the Republicans going into tonight. It'll be well before the evening, well into the evening before we know finally what happens, not only in the Senate, but in the House as well. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 right after this.
Decision 96, Election Night, is being sponsored in part by Ford Taurus, a look you've never seen from a name you know well. Have you driven a Ford lately?
I feel very
18 to get control of the Senate. They have to win 18 seats tonight to make sure that Trent Lott is not the majority leader of the Senate. On the basis of what we know so far, it looks like Trent Lott and the Republicans may indeed keep control of the Senate. Don't know enough yet about how the House is going to go. Bill Clinton wins re-election, first Democrat to get 2 full terms since FDR. Our CBS News coverage will continue after these messages.
You're going to stay on the job?
Well, obviously, I'm Chief of Staff and going to continue to be Chief of Staff as we work through the transition. It's no secret that at some point I'll go back to California, but right now I'm Chief of Staff of the President of the United States.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, in terms of looking at the strategy of this campaign, what went well and what has gone badly?
Well, obviously, strategy worked pretty well because the President basically kept on message to the American people about the importance of unifying together to try to deal with the issues that affect American families. I think his message on the economy, on jobs, on education, on crime, on health care, these were issues that affect American families. They recognized it, and I think the fact that Bob Dole never talked to those issues was important to the American people. I think that's the reason for the victory tonight.
As you probably know, sir, it's a little early in the evening, or at least difficult at this point of the evening, to talk about the shape of the Congress with any certainty. Except that it doesn't look as if the Democrats are going to regain control of either the House or the Senate. How difficult is that going to make life for the President?
Well, I would hope if anything comes out of this evening, it's that both parties agree to set aside the attacks, the gridlock, and the partisanship, and in a bipartisan way, regardless of what happens this evening, and it's too early to tell. But I would hope that both parties would focus on the President's themes, his message about dealing with the issues that affect families. The American people tonight made one thing clear. We're tired of attacks. We're tired of the kind of partisanship and gridlock we've seen. What we want to see are our issues dealt with. That's what they care about, and that's what they showed in this vote. And I think both parties would be smart to pay attention.
And given the history of the relationship between the executive and the legislative branch, do you think that's remotely possible?
I think if you look at the last few months of working with this Congress and our ability to get minimum wage done, our ability to get health care done in the Kennedy-Kassebaum bill, our ability to get our budget done, if you look at those issues, we did some important successes because they were willing to move towards the President's position. If they're willing to do that in this next Congress, assuming that they win a majority, I think we can serve the American people.
I did one more personal question. It's not about you, it's about the President. But we both know that he is 50 years old. He'll be 54 when his second term ends, if our projections are correct. Do you and he ever talk about that?
I think the President always looks to where he's been, and I think the key to this President is he's never forgotten his roots here in Arkansas and what he's about. He knows that the future belongs to the young people that are coming up, and it's that focus that I think keeps him on message with regards to where the American people are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Panetta, for joining us. We'll talk to you from Washington
Peter.
next time, I suspect. Leon Panetta, the President's Chief of Staff, who, rumor hath it, would like to run for the governorship in California someday. At any rate, he talks about what he thinks the issues are that the President has won on. Let's go and see what the voters thought today. ABC's Lynn Shure on our exit poll. Lynn.
Peter, what really worked for the
education, and the people recognized that, and they also knew that every single day he'd get up and go to work and think about them, and the American people really learned that they could count on him to fight for them.
Personally, on a personal, what's the single biggest difference tonight compared to 4 years ago for you?
Well, it's about 20 degrees warmer, first of all, but it's they're both gratifying in their own ways. You know, to run as a challenger and come out of nowhere for a win is obviously very, very exciting, but now we have a record, and having the chance to defend that record and keep fighting is great.
Okay, George Stephanopoulos, we'll hear more about your future later. Back to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Maria Shriver. Thank you, George Stephanopoulos. Another young man on the opposite side of the political spectrum joins us now. He's Ralph Reed, who, of course, is the man behind the Christian Coalition. 2 years ago, when you and I talked, Mr. Reed, I think that you expected that this presidential election would turn out a lot different than it is tonight.
Well, I don't know. Really, Tom, I think the best break that Bill Clinton could have had in 1994 was to have the Republicans gain control of Congress. It gave him a wake-up call. He moved to the center, and it made it possible for him to run to the right on issues like V-chip, on issues like welfare reform. He signed the Defense of Marriage Act. So I don't think tonight, if Bill Clinton wins, and certainly that's what's happening tonight, that it's a referendum for liberalism.
But we are seeing, for example, that Catholics are voting for Bill Clinton in overwhelming numbers. One of the real hot-button issues in this election has been abortion. And I think that you probably expected that the Catholics would go to Bob Dole on that issue alone.
Well, I would also point out, by the way, that according to a survey that we did, Tom, with the Wirthlin Research Company, what we found was that about 24% of voters said that Clinton's stand on abortion was a factor in them voting against him. Only 19% said that about Bob Dole. So the pro-life issue was a 5% differential winning issue for the Republicans.
We're also showing an enormous gender gap tonight, Mr. Reed, and it's been harmful to Republican candidates, not just at the presidential level, but based on the exit polling that we're seeing right across the board. And a lot of women in this country think that the Christian Coalition and other socially active groups on the right end of the spectrum, on the right side of the spectrum, make it too tough for them.
I don't think there's a scintilla of data that can support that from the exit polls. Again, as I said, on the abortion issue, it's a net gain for the Republicans. And by the way, Tom, 20% of the voters in an exit poll we've conducted tonight said that moral and family issues were the major factor in how they voted the way they did, and they voted 3-1 for Bob Dole. In addition to that, in Georgia, which I think Bob Dole is going to ultimately end up winning, among self-identified born-again evangelicals, 79% voted for Bob Dole, only 11% for Bill Clinton. The fact is that without this core of committed evangelical Christians, this would have turned into a meltdown all the way down the ticket. Bob Dole's going to lose tonight, but the Republicans are going to hang on to both the House and the Senate, and they can thank the evangelical vote for the fact that it's going to turn out that way.
Mr. Reed, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, we'll be talking to you again, I know, in the future. Well, we still have to resolve, of course, what's going to happen in the House and the Senate. Those are the races we'll be keeping track of throughout the evening here on NBC. We'll be back with more on Decision 96 after this.
For the latest in-depth election results, log on to CBS News on the web at www.cbsnews.com.
14 states, criminal justice is on the ballot in 13 states. Hunting hunters' rights is on the ballot in 10 states. 8 gambling, government and legal reform. This, among other things, has to do with giving people additional funds in many cases, and there are several tax questions and several social issues. And there are these 2 big ones in California yet to come, which we'll talk about. The California Civil Rights Initiative out there, and the proposition to legalize marijuana for medicinal purposes. I want to get one quick comment from ABC's Jeff Greenfield on this question of poll closings and whether or not people spoil things.
Very simply, if Dole had pulled an upset in the East, the Republicans would have been desperate for us to project that, to let the people out west know, get to the polls, we might be able to pull it off. The second point is we never know, when we talk about exit polls, who stays home. The Democrats who know they've won or the Republicans who know they've lost. I understand why the people in the West are upset. They feel disenfranchised. Every study I've seen says we don't know what the impact is.
Okay, Jeff, thanks very much. I know in the last 2 elections, 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 3 of the states in the Pacific time zone, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, vote higher than the national average. California and Hawaii, in both instances, have voted at a lower than national average. So we'll see what happens tonight. We're going to cut away now to our local stations all across the country to bring you up with politics and local events, and we'll be back on the half hour. Hope you'll join us then.
ABC News coverage of the 96 votes will continue in a moment.
We will do whatever happens tonight with great dignity, win, lose, or tie. Do you know what he's going to do? Vacate? What are the immediate plans? Do you know, Don?
Yeah, he plans to win still, I bet you. You watch him on that 96-hour marathon, and there is a man who is win, lose, or draw. He's going out as a winner.
But assuming, let's say, the worst for you, does he get down to Florida for a while?
I don't know what he plans to do. I think that obviously after a 4 or 5 days like he's had and everyone else has had, I think everyone's going to need a little rest.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Larry.
Don Rumsfeld, the campaign national chairman for Bob Dole, speaking from the Renaissance Hotel in Washington. I'm Larry King. We're with Bob Woodward. We'll be right back.
I'm here as the chairman of LCI International.
Held it since Franklin Roosevelt. But it seems to me that this time that Bill Clinton is out there doing it more on his own than he is as a man of the party. So it's going to be an interesting 4 years, Jonathan.
I think that's right. He's clearly on his own in the same way that Richard Nixon was in his big landslide in 1972. They actually lost 2 Senate seats that year. Ronald Reagan lost a couple of Senate seats in '84. But you know, Tom, when you look at this in historical perspective, Bill Clinton thought, I think when he went into politics, that his idol, John F. Kennedy's description of this century, a long twilight struggle with communism, that would be the big theme. Thanks to Bob Dole's generation, instead, we're ending with a kind of talk show presidency.
All right, thanks very much. Jonathan Alter will be seeing you during the course of this evening. Bill Clinton, of course, talking about a bridge to the 21st century. Now he gets to walk across it. We'll be back with more.
9:30, we'll have some more returns for you. Are the Democrats? Clinton wins Louisiana. Big pickup for President Clinton. Now the question is, are the Democrats going to dance the mandate Macarena? Stay tuned here to this CBS News station.
Democratic Chair Mike Peterson.
Right, we'll be getting to him in just a second, Mike, but as you can imagine, a big cheer went up here about 10 minutes ago when it was projected that President Bill Clinton would hang on to his job for another 4 years. And we'll go right now to Mike Peterson, chair of the Democratic Party here in Iowa. Mike, good news for Democrats,
yes.
But is it relevant to Iowa races?
Well, it obviously is very relevant. We're very pleased that the president has been, or at least projected to be reelected, making history. The last time we had a Democrat reelected to another term was Franklin Roosevelt. And I think this election is good for working families who are concerned about balancing our budget in a way that reflects our values and keeping our commitment to education, environmental protection, and Medicare. But I think it's going to bode well for our candidates down ballot here in Iowa, because it will be projected, I'm certain, that the president will carry Iowa.
Now, in terms of the Republicans nationwide, they also seem to be hanging on to their seats. Does that worry you for some of the races here? People seem comfortable.
Actually, we're seeing some very good omens on the Democratic side, picking up the New Hampshire seat, defeating a Republican incumbent there. We're seeing some very good things happen just generally. The president seems to have coattails in some areas of the country, not so much in other areas of the country. But at this point, we're feeling very solid about our performance so far.
Quickly, Tom Harkin, is he nervous upstairs?
Well, obviously we're nervous until the last vote is counted, but we're very optimistic. We saw a tenor of politics here in Iowa as of late that we're not used to, and it's a tenor that we think is going to be rejected here in Iowa, that being the negativity of the Jim Ross Lightfoot campaign. But the early exit polls give us every reason to be optimistic.
Okay, and now back to you, Sonia and Mike at the news desk. You've heard from the Democrats.
Yeah, the Embassy Suites is not the only hub of activity in Des Moines. Lena Vanier standing by live at Republican headquarters at the Hotel Fort Des Moines.
That's right. Lena has some breaking news. News 5 has learned that death threats have been made against Jim Ross Lightfoot. Lena, what can you tell us about that?
Well, obviously his campaign manager is not saying much at this point, but we can tell you that Steve Tomlinson, Lightfoot's campaign manager, has confirmed that there was some sort of a death threat made against Jim Ross Lightfoot. That is all he is saying at this time. He should be coming down here shortly to give us some more details, and of course we'll have that for you once he does come down. In the meantime, let's talk about one of the races that the Republicans here are tracking, and that is the 4th District congressional race that's pitting incumbent Greg Gansky against newcomer Democrat Connie McBurney. Joining me live is Gansky's campaign manager, Barbara Levering. Now, what are you hearing from your people about this race?
Good news, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of phone calls. We had 170 phones operating all day to get out the vote, and we seem to have been successful, but we can only wait until the polls close.
In terms of numbers, are you getting any information on the numbers?
Well, we're doing an excellent job in Polk County of turning out the Republican vote, so our base vote should be there. We're on. It's
indications we got of public opinion showed that. But I gather from what we've heard so far, individual Republicans are on the whole doing better.
Indeed, at this point, none of the freshman Republicans has lost. And it seems that, at least and on the Senate side, by the way, it looks like a draw so far.
Right, it's 2-2. And interestingly, we thought we would do much better on the House side than the Senate. It's still obviously early and we don't know everything. But it does look as if the public, I guess, decided that, well, they didn't like what the Republican Congress did. They weren't that mad at the individual members of Congress. That seems to me a misjudgment on their part, but they are entitled to that under the Constitution.
Congressman Barney Frank, it looks like it's going to be a long night. We'll have to wait for the Western returns to come in before we can finally determine what the makeup of the 105th Congress is going to be. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Congressman. In the 6th Congressional District here in Massachusetts, it's Republican Peter Torkelson facing his challenger, Democrat John Tierney. Here are the results as we have them so far. Just 26 of the precincts are in at this time, and as you can see, it's a pretty tight race here. 48% at the moment for the incumbent Torkelson and 50% for the challenger. Let's go over to David Ropeek, who is at Tierney headquarters.
There may be a new congressman in the 6th district. John Tierney is leading 50-48, and here's some of the breakdown. He lost Haverhill last time. This time he won it by about 8%. He lost Burlington, a Republican town, last time by 6%. He won it tonight by 8%. He won Peabody tonight by 58%, Newburyport by 52%. The city of Lynn, where he carried 54% last time, 65% now. There's a great deal of growing excitement here. There's still only 14% of the vote in, but a lot of the communities that John Tierney felt he had to do well in, he has done very well in. And in fact, one of the sophomore Republicans in the House, Peter Torkelson, may be in risk of losing his seat. Reporting live in Salem, I'm David Ropeek. Chet, now back to you.
All right, David, thanks. We'll be back in just a minute with more returns.
And our thanks to WCVB TV in Boston.
That they had found or had recovered an alphanumeric pager that contained text messages in a rental car at the Des Moines airport, and those text messages did contain death threats against Congressman Lightfoot. We have in turn notified the Capitol Hill Police Department, which is standard protocol anytime a death threat is made against a federally elected official. And I know that the Capitol Hill Police Department has in turn notified the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve, for joining us live on this news story. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you, Lena.
All right, Jeff Stein will be with us a bit later. We appreciate you joining us. We've got to go back now to ABC coverage of the election.
For nearly 80 years, it has been a safe house for Des Moines children.
Marijuana is out there. Gang activity is out there.
A house devoted to protecting Des Moines children.
Once you get on our street, our discipline is in effect.
It's a house for guidance and structure and hope.
The 9-year-old had witnessed the house being used for a crack house. Why doesn't she smile? Would you?
The Wilkie House. What does it mean to Des Moines, to your neighborhood, to you? This is Our House, Wednesday on News 5 at 10.
Is life leaving you a little flat? On the next Jenny Jones, they're busting out.
You're not really flashing people like she says. Hey, I'm having a good time.
Living large. On the next Jenny Jones.
Wednesday at 3 on News 5.
On the next voted.
I refuse to die this way.
Apollo 11, a Family Channel original movie, Sunday, November 17th.
From Atlanta, Lynn Russell, CNN Headline News. Only 10 states have yet to close their polls before Election 96 is history.
the biggest race already is decided. Chuck Roberts joins us from the election desk with the latest. Chuck?
Thanks, Lynn. Decided about 30 minutes ago. Indeed, a Dole spokesman, Nelson Warfield, has just faxed us a statement conceding defeat, saying that in spite of the vote, Bob Dole achieved his goal. But the winner is Bill Clinton, the first Democratic president to win re-election since FDR. We have determined that Bill Clinton has hit and passed the magic number of 270 electoral votes, the number he needs to win a second term. Wisconsin put him over the top. He swept New England and the industrial belt and took the traditionally Republican stronghold of Florida. Analysts say voter turnout has been higher than expected, thanks partly to good weather across the nation, and that has likely helped Clinton. They say the support of women voters was the key. Let's look at some of the state-by-state results. I think we're starting with New York, if memory serves. Bill Clinton easily wins New York, 54 to 37%. George Pataki, the governor, campaigned very hard, of course, for Bob Dole. Arkansas, Bill Clinton's home state, no problem for the president there. Moving on to Texas. This is Dole country. Texas has leaned Republican for many years. Dole wins it. Pennsylvania goes to the president with 27% reported. He's going to win that state. He will also win Illinois. In fact, handily, according to the early going. Illinois will go Clinton. So will Michigan next door, 48 to 44%, very early returns, of course. Exit polling is how this is determined. 54-38 is the spread in New Jersey. Mr. Clinton will win all the electoral votes there. And Florida, with 25 votes, is in the Clinton column. A third of the vote has been counted in that state. Mr. Clinton has been waiting out the vote in Little Rock, Arkansas tonight. His victory party at the old State House, the very place where he accepted his election to the presidency 4 years ago. Now his final campaign ends in victory. Skip Loescher is in Arkansas with the president. It was all expected, Skip, I guess.
Well, I guess it was, Chuck, and frankly, about the only person besides Bill Clinton this crowd wants to see is on stage right now. Singer Tony Bennett has just been introduced. This wall of humanity, shoulder to shoulder here. All were cheering, all were screaming, all were shouting just about half an hour ago when it was declared by CNN that Bill Clinton had won re-election, soon to be confirmed by the other three major television networks as well. Mr. Clinton, as far as we know, is still in the hotel not too far from here where he was watching the returns, no doubt waiting for Bob Dole's concession speech before he comes here, and possibly waiting for the polls to close in California, Oregon, and in Washington before indeed he comes and makes his victory speech. Chuck?
All right, Skip, thanks very much. We have the statement from Nelson Warfield, the Dole campaign official. Bob Dole, he said, has completed his last political mission with courage and honor. Even in defeat, he has much to claim in the way of success. Bob Dole led his party, the statement said, in the election representing trust and conservative principles. With Republicans headed toward retaining the leadership of Congress, this country, he said, is on the broadest front endorsing what Bob Dole stands for. No Republican has ever won the White House without carrying Ohio, and challenger Bob Dole lost there tonight despite his frequent campaign visits to the Buckeye State. He is waiting and has been waiting for returns at his apartment at the Watergate in the nation's capital, and Judy Fortin is standing by not far from where the party will be. It looks like it won't be a victory party, though, Judy.
Not tonight, Chuck. Certainly this has to be a very disappointing night for Bob Dole. He gave up everything in June when he resigned his majority leadership of the Senate. The big story tonight here in Washington among Republicans, what will the balance of power be among the House and the Senate? Over at the Renaissance Hotel, hundreds of people have gathered. They had hoped this would be a victory party. You can just look at the noise level. It doesn't even come anywhere near to that in Little Rock, Arkansas at this point. These folks have got to be very disappointed. They're going to be watching very closely to see what happens in the House and Senate. And when Bob Dole shows up at some point this evening, we think it's going to be after the polls close in California at 11 p.m. Eastern time. He spent a lot of money and time in California and no doubt wants to wait and see what's going to happen in that state before he makes an appearance. Chuck?
Any post-election plans for him? He heads to Florida, I presume?
That's what we had heard, and he could be on the plane by midnight Eastern time tonight to go down to his condo in Bal Harbour to rest up and no doubt think about retirement and what he's going to do next.
There's even talk of him joining the Clinton administration as heading a committee to reform Social Security and Medicare, but that's certainly way down the road. Judy, thanks very much. Now to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, Democrats are battling for control of the 105th Congress. In the Senate, Republicans control 53 of the 100 seats. When this night began, Democrats must gain 3 seats to gain the upper hand. Here's how things are shaping up at 9:35 Eastern in the hotly contested Massachusetts.